That's your money saying it's time for a McDonald's run. Because with new McValue at McDonald's, you get more than you expect. Like buy a 6-piece McNuggets and add a McChicken for just $1. Your money says let's go. Get more than you expect with new McValue. Prices and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
Hi, this is Little Anthony of Little Anthony and the Imperials, and you're listening to the Dr. Sky Show.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our show today. Always special guests here on our radio show. As we now go back into the history of rock and roll, it's a real privilege and honor to welcome a very special man with a very special group of the 1950s, Little Anthony and the Imperials, as we talk on the phone today with Little Anthony Gourdine himself, the namesake of this very fascinating band of the 1950s and 60s. And before we introduce our very special guest, just a brief read and history of Little Anthony and the Imperials. Little Anthony and the Imperials is an American rhythm and blues soul vocal group from New York City, first active in the 1950s. Lead singer Jerome Anthony, Little Anthony Gourdine, was noted for his high-pitched falsetto voice influenced by none other than Jimmy Scott. The other original members were Clarence Collins, the group founder, Ernest Wright, Nate Rogers, and Tracy Lord, the last two of whom were replaced by Sammy Strain. The group was one of the very few groups to maintain success on the rhythm and blues and pop charts throughout the 1960s, and they were inducted into, rightfully so, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame on April the 9th, 2009, 23 years after the group's first year of eligibility for induction. And with that, it's a real privilege and honor to welcome to our radio show today none other than Little Anthony Gourdine of Little Anthony and the Imperials. Thank you so much for joining us today as we talk about the history of rock and roll. Good afternoon.
Hey, what's up? How you doing?
I'm doing fine, and I'm just so excited here. A big fan of the 50s. I grew up in New York City, and I want to hear a little bit about the story of how your group, of course, started in New York City. And tell us a little bit about that because, well, I remember being born in 1956. I got the sound of many of the New York street corner harmony groups, but how did you guys get started?
Oh, the same way you did, listening to those kind of groups. I mean, as a kid, I listened to all of them, the Dells, the Flamingos, the Orioles, when I was like 10, 9, 11 years old. So I was influenced. And actually, a lot of times people say the 50s, actually, it was the tail end of the 50s that our life became. Even though I was in other groups, and I know a lot of interviewers love to talk about something that happened with another group that I was with because it's me.
Yes.
Or whatever. But I never relate to it because I was a baby. I was 14. And you really can't use that 14-year-old as a measuring stick to what my career became. It just was the beginning of a kid that was singing like a lot of kids in those days. So actually, the most important part of that time in the 50s, late 50s, was really 58.
Wow.
When we met George Goldner and Richard Barrett. That was the beginning of a real career. And prior to that was just floundering around like everybody else, trying to find ways to get on the radio. So,
wow.
But it's very difficult for me to relate, and I know fans tend to be more deeper into that sort of thing. And, it's almost like fantasy football. They go deeper than the people that actually play the game.
Sure.
So we don't really care.
I totally can relate.
Right. In my mind, it's really when that began in 1958.
Great story here. I'm reading from one of the album jacket covers here, and I'm reading this, my friend. Calling themselves the Chesters, they visited, that is, Richard Barrett is reminiscing. You visited Richard Barrett on the 12th floor of 1650 Broadway in Manhattan. Tell us that story, because this is the story that we want to hear, the beginnings of this most amazing life legacy here in rock and roll history with Little Anthony and the Imperials.
Okay, we were a bunch of kids out of Brooklyn, out of Fort Greene Project, like a bunch of thousand other little groups, trying to get a deal. In those days, I was very fortunate to live in New York City, where the independent record companies were all located in 1650 Broadway. And so it was easy to know where they were. And in those days, you got to understand, technology did not exist that exists today. You literally didn't have to do a demo and go in there, hey, listen to my demo. You actually walked in and asked for an audition. Can you imagine that?
No.
A live audition. Yeah, but they talked to all of them, man. That's the way it was in those days. So we just happened to be fortunate enough. It wasn't me. It was Clarence Collins that knew Richard Barrett indirectly. I don't know where he met him or what, but he knew him, and he kept saying, hey, I got this guy that just came with my group. And his name is Anthony Gourdine. And, man, I think you should listen to us because he's got a really, really good voice. And that's how that started. And then when we actually went in, and I was at, let me see, what was that? There was a winter of 58.
Yes.
We walked into Richard Barrett heard us, had an audition, an impromptu audition. And we sang a song that Ernest wrote called Just the Kinds of People in the World.
Wow. And
that was it. He called in George Gourdine, who was the president of Gourdine Records. And, he says, you got to listen to this. And that was the beginning of my career. Even though prior to that, I'm just like everybody else, man, hitting this. Mm-hmm. There was no real career at that point. I was just a kid going to high school, Boston High School in Brooklyn, and just trying to make it like kids do today.
You better believe it. And you know something, I was in that same, well, I shouldn't say the same era, but later on in the 70s, we used to be part of a track team and would run against the good folks at Boys High School, and they always won. I mean, that was a powerhouse school.
They had two things they were really at the top of their game, was the track team and the basketball team.
Absolutely, my friend. Just an amazing story. My mother hails from Bensonhurst and that area, and also Flatbush area in Brooklyn, so we have a lot in common. And that's why, as we talk to you today, this is so fascinating. Again, I'm grateful for your time as we reminisce about the history of rock and roll, the early days. Anthony Gourdine, Little Anthony Gourdine of Little Anthony and the Imperials. He's our special guest on our radio show today. And all throughout this radio show, folks, or in the extended version that you can hear on our website, we'll give you that information at the end of the radio show. You can hear select pieces of music from the best of Little Anthony and the Imperials. You know, this is so fascinating as we talk with you today. You've been doing music and performing for how many years now? This is amazing.
60 years.
Wow. Well, God bless. That's an amazing time. I mean, I'm 60 years young, and you've been doing this for as long as I've been on the planet. So that's a tribute. Wow.
Yeah. Actually, I was 15 years old, and that was 1956.
That's incredible.
And so it's been 60 years. And prior to that, even when I was 14, I was singing and recording and very local stuff I was doing, like every kid in those days wanted to be a star.
Yes.
Because we would hear all those different records on the radio, Dr. Jive, WWRL, Tommy Smalls,
yes.
Butterball, on and on and on and on, and then Alan Freed or WINS Wins. Mm-hmm. And every kid, they sang, and you wanted to be, you if you could, you imagined in your mind, well, what if? Mm-hmm. What if I'm good enough to sing? People say they like the way I sound, and then they like the guys that I'm singing with, the way they sound. What if? And that's all show business is what if?
You better believe it. It's amazing to hear these stories, and I want to remind our listeners as we go to the break each time, we're going to be promoting an individual song from Little Anthony and the Imperials, in which you may be hearing the entirety of from our website, but again, excerpts here for the radio show today. And this is amazing because, I must say this from the bottom of my heart, sir. I really feel your music is absolutely beautiful. It brings back happy times and happy memories for me. And I'm sure that's the same with people, not only here in America, but around the world, too.
Well, I'm sure that every generation had that. I'm sure the people in the 40s and in the beginnings of, 1941, 39, before the World War II, and the big bands and Ella Fitzgerald, everybody, every generation has that. Mm-hmm. Where we latch on to that particular sound that represents what we're living at that time. And so we were no different. We came up in the Patty Page era,
yes.
How much is that doggy in the window?
Oh, yes. Way back.
Tony Bennett, I go to rags to riches. And we came into that it was sort of a lull between World War II. At the end of World War II, the big bands kind of disappeared. And Patty Page and all these great,
mm-hmm.
singers and, you know, and then it went into the 50s, which was sort of like early 50s, early 50, 50, 51, 50, and it had this really kind of milky white wave type sound, you know,
yes.
the four aces, you know, three according to the fountain and this and that and that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was it. But here comes this music that comes out of nowhere, which was being played on black stations, called R&B, rhythm and blues.
Yes.
And Bo Diddley, who is that guy, you know? and Chuck Berry, and the Moon Glows, and the Flamingos, and the Eldorados. The people say, whoa, you know?
You know, it's so incredible. We're coming up on the first break here in our radio show today. A very special guest here as we talk and reminisce with none other than our special guest, Little Anthony Gourdine, of the namesake of that very famous, still to this day, a most amazing time in rock and roll history, Little Anthony and the Imperials. And folks, as we continue to do our radio show in this particular excerpt, we'd like to have you listen to, in most of its entirety, depending on where you're listening to this interview, one of my favorite here from one of their albums, I'm on the Outside Looking In. This, of course, going back to August of 1964. Our very special guest, Anthony Gourdine, Little Anthony of Little Anthony and the Imperials, joins us here in our radio show today. And we're celebrating, of course, their splendid time and continuing here throughout all time and space in rock and roll history. We'll be right back.
I'm on the outside looking in. On the inside with you are with somebody new, and I don't know what to do, 'cause I'm still in love with you. In love with you. I'm on the outside looking in. I've had my day, and you let me go my way. Now it's me who has to pay. I never should have gone away. I never should have gone away and left you like I did, with tears in your outside looking in. Gotta find a way back to your heart, dear. Once again, won't you take me back again? I'll be waiting here till then, on the outside looking in. Outside looking in. On the outside looking in. I don't wanna be looking in.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our very special radio show today as we continue to celebrate the history of rock and roll. On the line, giving us this exclusive interview today, and we're grateful for his time, Little Anthony Gourdine, of the namesake of the band Little Anthony and the Imperials. He joins us throughout the entirety of our radio show, reminiscing about old times, present times, and times of the future in the story of rock and roll. I got to start off this way. 1964, and I'm reading this from one of the excerpts here in the jacket of one of the albums I have, the year of the British invasion. It was a time when musicians who weren't from England had a lot of trouble getting airplay. Even Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, couldn't make it into the top 10. If you were an American act, you had to be in the top of your class to survive, and few did. The Beach Boys, as you know, the Four Seasons, and yes, Little Anthony and the Imperials.
I'll go further. Dionne Warwick.
Wow.
The Drifters. There were several of us that held our own. Well, we didn't know what was happening. We just knew that it was just onrush. Music coming out of England. And obviously it was led by the Beatles.
Yes.
And then you went from there, Gazillion acts came out of there, man, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And they all were trying to get that kind of whatever the Beatles were doing. And but on the other hand, the contemporary R&B or contemporary pop still held its own if there was talent. And, you know, Dionne Warwick had tremendous amount of talent. If you notice, Stan Applebaum, the Drifters, Lieber and Stroller, who wrote all his great songs, Coasters, you know, they were just unique. Each act was so different from the other. That's a lot different in today because it's very hard to differentiate between who's who.
Yes.
Because basically, if you listen, it's hard. You know, it's great you said that because I was just sitting in my car on Sirius Radio that I got in the car, and I'm listening, and there's some really nice singers today. Sia.
Sure.
She's that was Adele. Most of them are women.
Yes, they are.
Sam Smith. Sam Smith. But in when we came up, it was similar. And they're sort of in another category because basically everything else starts to sound the same. And it loses whatever it is that we had. There was only one Elvis. There was only one Bo Diddley. They all were different. Their sounds were different. Their whole approach and the creativity was different. And we were living in an era when everybody was excited about the new technology. Okay, you know what new technology was? A 45.
Yeah.
A donut record.
That's so funny.
Or those big giant, you remember those big old tapes, man? Like, he was amazing. And
I remember.
That's cool, man. Color TV was just coming out. You know, so it was exciting times. Star Trek came on TV.
Oh, yeah, and I remember this, Anthony. I remember going on Saturdays with my parents down to the Woolworth. I was in New Jersey at the time.
Yeah.
And they would be looking at me funny because I wanted to buy the latest 45. And that was so amazing because you bought your 45, maybe it was, 69 cents or whatever, and then...
I think 69, 89 cents. That's what, yeah.
And then you went over to the counter where they had the little cafe there, and my mother and father would say, okay, you might as well get an egg cream, unless you're not from New Jersey or New York. Most people don't even know what that is, right?
Right. And like, I remember when there used to be 78s, a lot of people don't remember that.
Sure.
The little bitty, you know, and then they had to figure out, wait a minute, how do you pay the 45? So they got them little donut things, and you put the 45 on. You used to buy them in the store, and you put it on your thing, and put your instrument and play it.
That's so cool.
It was just remarkable. It was analog, a sound that can't be duplicated today.
Yes.
I've talked to some of the top performers who've all said, man, when you came up, man, it was like we missed something.
Yes, we
because
did.
with all of the technology today, it's almost like it's sanitized.
You got that right.
But when you start listening to those 78s and albums and analog, you know, you can even hear a horn sometimes go beep beep. It was leakage everywhere.
You got it. It was real. It was real.
It was real.
That's
there
right.
You go.
You know, I got to ask you on a serious note, the story of Jimmy Scott. I've read a little bit of his bio, but the importance of Jimmy Scott to you personally on a more emotional level. Talk about Jimmy Scott because he deserves a lot of recognition.
Yeah, his lovely wife, Jeannie Scott, and I have been friends for years. In fact, I just talked to her on Facebook just today, this morning.
Awesome.
So we stay in contact, yeah. Jimmy, I knew Jimmy when I was, okay, how old was I? I think when I first met him, I was like 19 or 20.
Yes.
And, I heard his songs on radio. Jimmy was an enigma. He was this very tall guy with this very little bitty voice, you know? And at that time, you're hearing Sinatra, you're hearing Nat Cole, you're hearing Tony Bennett, you're hearing all these powerful Mel Torme, you're having these powerful voices, Nate Nelson, the Flamingos, on and on and on and on. and every voice was powerful. But here comes this guy that's like almost like a woman's voice. Not almost. If you didn't know to find out he was a guy, you would have thought he was a lady.
Billie Holiday or somebody, right? You never know, right? Nancy Wilson,
you
right?
Know.
Right.
Nancy told me, she said her whole career was built on Jimmy.
Amazing.
She told me.
Amazing.
If you listen to their styles, they're similar. We call whole notes. Not a lot of vibrato. They'll hold it, and that's what he did. He made it famous. And then he was the most honored, respected singer from his peers. Now, here's a guy who never had a gold record, never had any platinum. He never had anything. Yet, Frank Sinatra said he was one of the prolific voices of our time. Tony Bennett talked about him. Every major singer keyed in on this guy, and I was no different. Frankie Lyman, if you listen to Frankie Lyman, who do you hear?
You know something? You do. And let me...
Frankie told me.
Right.
He said that's what I was listening to.
You got that right. But let me say this. Frankie Lyman's another story that I'd like to talk about, too. But you're so right. That voice of Frankie Lyman, you're right. Jimmy Scott, very similar. And all these greats that we're talking about today. But here's something that I learned, too, and I know you know this. Lionel Hampton gave him the nickname Little Jimmy Scott. I didn't know that. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, I assumed what I heard was, I don't know if this is just a myth or what.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
That his voice was so light that he called him Little, even though he was big. It's the same with me.
Yes.
That name, Little Anthony, came by Alan Freed. But it wasn't because of my stature. I'm 5'8" and a half.
Sure.
It's just that our voices are so light. If you didn't know it, you'd think we were little guys. And that's how we got those names.
Well, that's why we want to do these interviews, because I like to talk about living history. And I've been saying this sincerely, sir. You and your organization, your band, your group, everyone in this particular conversation today, we need to share this information. This is from me as the host. We need to pass along this torch so other generations understand all the great musicians of their time. And it's sad because I know, and I'm not asking you this personally about Little Anthony and Imperials, but so many young people grow up today with that, cell phone in their hand, the smartphone. And maybe, I don't know what you think, and that's why we have you here, maybe many of them are forgetting about the great periods in music history. We need to preserve.
I don't think they're forgetting about it. Our schools are not teaching it.
There you go. That's it.
I can get on the whole subject about public schools, so I'm a charter school guy.
Good for you. I love that.
And because there's no time. When somebody said to forget one's history, that it's condemned to repeat it.
You're exactly right. Mm-hmm.
So when you don't know where you came from, and I mean, it's so sad. I've noticed even back in the 80s when there was sampling records, all the hip-hop groups and the rappers, they didn't even know the people that they were sampling, but they knew something was good about it. So there were certain artists that were out there who were just different, and they held their own world, like James Brown.
Yes, and
he was the most. What they call it? When the artists, they use your music and they put it in their records. I forgot what they call that, but anyway, it passes my mind right now.
That's okay.
I was going to say test it, but anyway, that's what it is. They constantly listen, but they don't know what the history of what was happening. Now, let's go back a little bit. When I was a kid, I was blessed to have a father who was a jazz musician.
Yes.
Alto and tenor saxophone. I played with Buddy Johnson and some of the top bands of those days in the 40s and 50s, the early 50s. So I was exposed to that era. Even though I was 8 years old, 9, I remember Illinois Jack and all the great, Bird and all of them, man. And it's like,
what an experience.
I knew all about that. I knew because my dad gave me a history lesson on what was going on.
That's so important.
So he would tell me what this right. So even though I was very young, I had the great pleasure of listening to that music and then blessed to have the ability. I had met a lot of them. As a kid, became a friend. I mean, it was amazing.
Well, we want to hear about, excuse me, we want to hear about this, but we're coming up on that break again here on our radio show.
Okay.
And as we go to the break, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about another of the great singles here, Going Out of My Head. We're talking, of course, with Little Anthony Gourdine of Little Anthony and the Imperials, rock and roll history here on our radio show today. Here it is, folks, Going Out of My Head from October of 1964. And we'll be back in just a few moments with our very special guest here throughout the entire hour, Little Anthony Gourdine of that very famous rock and roll group, as it talks about so many wonderful stories about love and music of the late 1950s and 60s. Little Anthony and the Imperials.
Well, I think I'm going out of my head. Yes, I think I'm going out of my head over you. Over you. I want you to want me. I need you so badly. I can't think of anything but you. And I think I'm going out of my head, 'cause I can't explain the tears that I shed over you. Over you. I see you each morning, but you just walk past me. You don't even know that I exist. Going out of my head over you, out of my head over you, out of my head day and night, night and day and night. Oh, I'm to your heart. There's no reason why my being shy should keep us apart. And I think I'm going out of my head. Yes, I think I'm going out of my head. Going over you, out of my head, over you, out of my head, day and night, day and night. Oh, come on, yeah, all right, yeah,
And welcome back to our show, ladies and gentlemen. Always great guests here. Today, we have the privilege and honor of speaking with Little Anthony Gourdine of none other than Little Anthony and the Imperials, reminiscing about rock and roll history of the late 1950s and 60s, musical icons themselves, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame back in April of 2009, 23 years after the group's first year of eligibility for induction. Welcome back, Mr. Gourdine. A privilege and honor to hear your voice and to share this with all those folks out there that love your music and your organization, your group. Let's talk a little bit about this particular time period. There's one man that I wanted to highlight here, and he gets so much coverage. Some of it maybe not so wonderful, and that is the story of Alan Freed. I'm enamored by this guy, being a broadcaster myself. Talk about Alan Freed.
No, I could do it briefly. I met Alan Freed when I was really young.
Mm-hmm.
I was 14 years old, and I was with a local little group that didn't mean a lot. It was called the DuPont. And to make a long story short, we ended up on a record company called Royal Roots, which is run by Teddy Reed, who was one of the managers of Alan Freed. And so they told us, hey, he's going to have a big show at the New York Paramount. What was that, 1955? Yeah. 14, yeah. He was having a big show because I was in high school. I had to get dismissed to do the show for a week at the New York Paramount and had everybody on there. You know, like Lyman Teenagers, the Platters, on and on and on and on.
Yes, sir.
And so we got to open the show, you know, and that was the first time that I met him. And he didn't forget. He didn't forget.
Amazing.
He would stand by the wings and watch. And also, the unique thing about this is I met another man by the name of Teddy Randazzo, who became prolific in my life a few years later, because he was with a group called the Chuckles, the Three Chuckles.
I've heard of that.
And and his dressing room was next to mine. and that was it. He said to me one day, he says, "Kid, one of these days we're going to work together." Who knew? It was a prophecy.
Yes.
Because 7 years later, whatever it was, in 1964, we ended up hooking up again. And that's another story. I have a book out called My Journey, My Destiny. And in there it gets more detailed about it. If anybody wants to check it out, you can get it on Amazon or whatever.
Oh, absolutely.
And,
yes.
Yeah, and it tells you more in depth, because I know we don't have the time to get deep, into
Sure.
what. But at the same time, I met these two people.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people ask me, well, how did you get that name, Little Effie? It was Alan Freed. Because Alan found out that, you used to be that kid that opened the show in the DuPont.
Yeah.
Back in the when 1955, now 1958. There was somebody, one of the record promoters came into his office to try to promote our record, Tears in My Pillow, and he says, "Man, that kid's voice is so." I mean, he sees that girl's voice. She's got a great voice. And the guy said, "Well, that's no she. That's a he."
I gotta laugh,
said,
Anthony. It's so cool.
It's true. He said, "Well, what's his name?" Anthony Gourdine.
Right.
He started saying Little Anthony.
There you go.
Later on, when I saw him and did a show with him, he said, "Yeah, I figured it out who you was. You were the kid that started with the DuPont." I said, "Yep, that's me."
That's an amazing story. But I got to go back to this whole thing of the DuPonts. Most people don't know this, but the namesake of DuPont, you can figure it out if you think long enough. You named it after what? The chemical company? Tell me how that came about.
I didn't do anything. I was inducted into the group.
You were inducted in.
By William Dockley. He had the name already set up.
Right. Wow.
I don't know where he got it, but yes, he did get it from the chemical company DuPont. I'm sure he was riding along or walking along, he saw the name DuPont. And he said, "Oh, that's a good name."
Yes. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about Tears on My Pillow, the Imperials' first million-selling hit. That's incredible. Mm-hmm. I mean, a million-selling hit in any time period, but we're going back into the late 50s and 60s. That's incredible. I mean, that must have put not only a big smile on your face.
You know what the most incredible thing is?
What's that?
It was a two-sided hit. Both sold over $1 million, Just Because People Roll on the Other Side.
Mm-hmm.
And Tears of a Pillow sold $1 million. We're the only group that did that.
That's incredible. That's
how we ended up with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It was our body of work that they put together and figured, my gosh, these guys did. We never won a Grammy. There were no Grammys when we were coming up.
No such thing, right?
So they didn't know, we would just pass by with us at this gray area. But they realized people like Paul Schaefer, Paul Simon, Billy Joel, all them cats I knew were on the committee, and they said, "This is stupid. This group is something we can't even think about."
Yes.
Billy Joel said, "I was inspired him when he was in high school to really. I want to be like you, man. I want to sound like you."
Now, what an honor is that? Wow, the powerhouse of Billy Joel, and look at you. You're his inspiration.
I've been friend a long time. In fact, I was at his concert a year and a half ago in New York. But he introduced me. Actually, sang "Tears My Pillow" in Madison Square Garden, 19,000 people.
Oh my goodness! I remember this. I remember something too, and it helped me on this. Back in the 70s, lived in New Jersey, would take the bus over to Madison Square Garden. Who didn't, or if you lived there, you went there by subway or bus. But I remember going in the 70s to Richard Nader's rock and roll revivals in Madison Square Garden.
Right, well, they called it revivals then. There was no such thing as doo-wop.
Yes.
Where that came from, that's another story.
No, and let me say this. I know the sensitivity of the term doo-wop, and I wasn't going to bring that name into the conversation, but no. I just wanted to say how wonderful it was, Anthony, when we would go there as kids in high school. We would sit there and see the likes of Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley on stage, and who knows, maybe I saw you too.
Yeah, everybody. And it was called those days a revival.
You bet. That was amazing.
And so, and it was just at that era, and it was a big success. And Richard Nader was the top dog. he was the first to really deal with that, you know,
Yes.
and figure I'm going to start doing these revivals. So he really started that, and was hugely successful.
You know,
And
I was watching television about 3 months ago on PBS, and it's late a Saturday night, and I'm turning on, and I see this amazing bunch of 50s and 60s rock and roll type acts, and there you are on stage, and I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to see if I'm lucky and see if I can get in touch with Anthony Gourdine, and you know what? We're doing it, my friend, and it was just amazing to watch these concerts. So you're going strong, 5 by 5, all over the place. I mean, your schedules never end. You just keep going and going and going, and that's great.
Well, I've been blessed, man. You know, it's just like I said. People have asked me, man, what do you do for your voice? What do you do? Well, obviously, I take care of it. You know, but I tell people it's not my voice. It's my Father God's voice. He gave it to me.
Well, that's a beautiful thing. That really is.
And because at 75 years old, I blow my mind when I hit a note. It's supposed to sound like that at 75.
Wow.
So it's not natural. It's supernatural.
It is. It's a special talent. It's something that you're right. It's coming from the divine, and I believe very strongly in what you're saying. I'm not just mincing words.
Yeah,
it has to.
I would never say that to this audience.
It has to be.
I'm living that truth. I'm living it. So some days, in fact, the other day, I like to power walk, you know, because it builds up my lung power.
You're a great idea.
And then I do vocalizations while I'm really running. Try that one downtown, see how that works for you. But that's how I do it. And sometimes I'll hit a note and go, what the heck? How do they do that?
Well, that's amazing that you maintain that vocal strength. I mean, there are many performers, and I'm not kissing up here, Anthony. I'm just being very honest. There are many performers that obviously have retired. You know, they've hung up their coat and they go on the laurels of the great things they've done in the past. But you continue, the group continues, and I'm thinking. I spoke with your son, and you know, I can't guarantee anything. I'm not that important. I just try to do a good show, and people say they enjoy it. But it'd be awesome to have you come out here to the folks in Arizona. And I know the perfect place to do it. I mean, we could talk about that off air sometime because you're popular wherever you guys go, and it's timeless. So there you go, right?
I used to be in Arizona a lot, especially in the 80s. For some reason, it kind of dried up. But show business is like that because you have different generations, different taste in music, and that's to be expected. Like I'm going to where am I going? Oh, I'll be in England for a week. The Manchester, so we're doing concerts there, and songs that were not hits here, but songs that were big hits in Europe, like "Better Use Your Head" and "Gonna Fix You Now." And you tell that to people today, they go, "Whoa, what?" So those songs were huge hits in Europe.
That's amazing.
In Italy, France. So I get these calls sometimes, and I'm off and running to Europe, and I'm amazed sometimes how they revere that, and I'm going, but in America, no one would even remember what it was. But
you got that right. We're coming up on another break here, and I hate to cut you short again, brother. One more segment we have with our very, very special guest here, Anthony Gourdine, otherwise known as Little Anthony of Little Anthony and the Imperials. As we go out with this particular segment, we go back in the time tunnel and time capsule and hear a rendition of Hurt So Bad. Can you imagine, folks? You were hurt in love, and all of a sudden now you're wondering, what the heck's going to happen to me? These songs are powerful. You're listening to me, Steve Cates, here on a very special edition of our radio show today, reminiscing about many of the greats of the rock and roll era. And today, that honor is bestowed upon us by Little Anthony and the Imperials.
Uh-oh. The last cookie.
You can get a new box of cookies in as fast as an hour with Walmart Express Delivery.
Are you my guilty self-conscience?
No, I'm the voice offering you promo code EXPRESS for free delivery on your first order.
Hey, who ate my cookies?
You mean, these cookies?
Order now. Welcome to your Walmart. Promotion valid for first express delivery order. $50 minimum subject to availability. Restrictions apply.
We'll be right back after these short but important commercial announcements that keep our radio show going. We'll be right back, and thank you for joining us.
I know you don't know what I'm going through. Standing here looking at you. Well, let me tell you. things people say. You've been making out okay. She's in love, don't stand in her way. Well, let me tell you that it hurts so bad. It makes me feel so sad. It's gonna hurt so bad if you walk away. Why don't you stay and let me make it up to you? I'll do anything you want me to. You love me before, please love me again. I can't let you go back to him. Don't go, please don't go. Come back, it hurts so bad. Don't make it hurt so bad. I'm begging you.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this exciting radio show that you tell us you like so much. Our special show today talks about the history of rock and roll with none other than the legend himself, Little Anthony Gourdine, the namesake of Little Anthony and the Imperials. He's been kind enough to join us throughout this entire hour, reminiscing about the past and also talking about the future. And again, this organization, this group, has been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame back on April the 4th of 2009. A great honor. Mr. Gourdine, welcome back. We were talking a little bit about so many of the stories that you came across in this life journey in the music world. But this is fascinating. Talk a little bit more about this particular time in music history, because we wanted to talk before. I mentioned a little bit about Frankie Lyman. Talk about him. I always thought Frankie Lyman was an excellent performer, as I'm sure you do too.
No, he was one of the greats of his time. He's like Jackie Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those kind of people come along every 100 years, it seems. Sammy Davis, that kind of thing, and that's where he was. Unfortunately, Frankie, I became his friend when I performed for Alan Freed when I was with the DuPonts.
Yes. And
Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers were on the same show at the New York Paramount. And so I got to know him then. That was the beginning of our relationship, and then we became best of friends. At the same time, we were both performing and making records. And he was a unique cat, but he had a lot of problems.
Yes.
You know, he got caught up in the drug world, which all of us did. But in this case, it ended up taking his life.
Oh, that's sad.
So, I mean, the story about him is unbelievable, because this guy was really absolutely outstanding singer and performer. And I learned a lot just watching Frankie.
Mm-hmm.
And just to be his friend and hanging out and going to dinner and all this stuff was a real blessing to me.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And in fact, when I got that in the book, I was in Chicago performing in the Regal Theater in Chicago, and I got a call. My wife said, I was coming home. And when I got to the airport, my wife picked me up. She had that look on her face, so something was wrong. And I'm thinking, is the kids okay?
Yes.
You know, first thing out of my mouth. She says, I got something to tell you. I said, what? Frankie's not with us anymore.
Oh, boy.
He died the night before, and I didn't know.
That's sad.
He called me to meet him at a place we always like to go over the 54th Street and Broadway. We'd always hook up and be over there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was supposed to meet him that day, and he was gone.
Oh, sad. See how precious life is. And, you know, I don't want to get dramatic here, but I thought this quote appropriate. A good friend of mine, I didn't create this, nor do I take credit for it, but this friend of mine describes life as this, Anthony. Life is but a short dance in the sun. And I thought that's a very appropriate quote, don't you? Because it talks about how life is so precious and how short it is. And in this case, when you're talking about the sad death and the untimely passing of Frankie Lyman and others, we all recognize that.
I've been touched. I'm a believer.
Mm-hmm.
And I know who my Redeemer is. I know who that's clear to me.
That's beautiful.
Life doesn't end. It does not end. It just goes from one stage to another. Human beings were not meant to die, but then we all know about Adam and all of that stuff, and we're just descendants of that.
Mm-hmm.
So like you see, a cat's a cat and a dog's a dog. We have the nature of the first man to walk this earth that blew it.
Yes.
And so there's life and death now. The whole world is moaning for that day when it's redeemed, and it's eternal life. But that has been turned over for us. Whether you believe it or not, it doesn't change the fact that it happened. Mm. And I say this without any trepidation, that when Jesus Christ gave his life, he came in this earth.
Yes.
God was here.
You bet.
To give the only thing that can pay for what we did so that we can live forever. So I don't, you know what? I always say this every day at declaration when I get up in the morning. My best years are ahead of me.
Amen.
You know?
You got it, brother.
Something good's going to happen. So someday I'm going to leave this earth. What will I leave? What kind of legacy would I leave?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I hope it's something that people can look back on. But we can't stay here now because we're under that curse. We got to go.
Yes.
But here's the good news. We can live. It's eternal. You leave the body. The body ain't nothing but an earth suit.
Sure.
It has to go back to the grave. But you yourself, the real person, that spirit in you, is alive. It will stay alive. You could be in one place or another.
Well, I love that. You've said so much in 2.5 minutes here, and I mean this, my friend, that, I'm a spiritual being too, and I'm a believer in Jesus Christ as my Savior, and I say this with no trepidation nowadays, and I don't mean to get political. It seems like many of these traditions are being sequestered or stepped on, and that's a shame.
It was foretold that these days would come.
Yes, sir.
And so, but that's okay, because the absent from the body is to be the present with the Lord. Now that's for a believer, but also for the non-believer. It says in the Bible, it's appointed to man that dies once and then the judgment. I don't want that part.
Yes, that's right. So in other words.
By the grace of God, man, we're all here. You're here.
That's right.
We're talking the good stuff.
We're having a good time.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. All the bad, the good, whatever it is, wonderful gift to be able to have this physical body.
Yep.
And I know my days. Some days I think about I'm 75. My goodness gracious, and I know so many people, man. Friends, it's incredible. Of all the people that are gone, that I came up with, Ruth Brown, this one, that one, and it goes on and on and on. Who will he go? Hundreds, it seems like, not here anymore.
It's amazing the way you put it, and I totally agree with you, my friend. And in the short 4 minutes that we have with you, I wanted to try to cram in as many reminiscing stories as possible. You and your entire group are the first musical group to actually play the prestigious Copacabana nightclub. Talk about that. That's amazing. We were the first singing group of that era, yes, before the Temps were second. Temptations were second. Yes.
It's kind of complicated. Like I said, you get the book, you can read it. It's in the book. It's more, I can get more details, but we were the first to go in there. Mr. Julius Patel, who was a trip. That's a book in itself.
Yeah. That's amazing, my friend.
But there are many things we did. The Lincoln Center, with D.R. Warwick and the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. I mean, I've had so many wonderful things over the years, and I look back and I have no regrets. And the only regret was if I could go back and do it again, I would. I'd do it better.
I'd like to be there. I'd like to be there with you as the listeners, because here's a couple of cool things. You made 2 appearances on the Ed Sullivan Show. That's big time. Yep. You're also on Soul Train, Dick Clark's American Bandstand, The Midnight Special, The Tonight Show. Wow, it keeps going, Anthony. It's just incredible.
Craft music hall, on and on. And that's one of the reasons that Paul Simon told me, he said, man, when we started looking at this, it's your body of work that got you the first group that didn't have any Grammys, didn't have anything, and was inducted into the Rock Hall of Fame because of your body of work.
Yes.
It's unmatchable.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. So let's talk about the future here. We're talking about you not stopping. Great. Keep going, keep going. So you have concerts. People just go to your website and they're going to see where you're performing, not only here, but you're talking about going to England. So this is a worldwide sensation, as rightfully it should be. So describe some of the things coming up for little Anthony Gourdine in the next year or so.
October, we're all over the place. I mean, where we going? It's going to be rough in October. With Fabian, and then I'll go off. And then what I'm doing in England is just me, Little Anthony. I do things with Little Anthony, I do things with the Imperials. But people don't understand, this is not what they think. This is not the Imperials 50 years ago, 50-something, 58 years ago. No. People live and they die.
Yes, they
but
do.
the brand, we became a brand like the Temptations, the name, the Imperials, Little Anthony, and the Imperials is a brand. So we had many, 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 many members. Mm-hmm. And there's only one cat survived other than me, and that's Ernest Wright. Yes. Still with the guys, still with us. But all the rest, there's been many, many people that have some and became an Imperial.
It's amazing.
So,
what an amazing journey that you've given us here, my friend. And I want to thank you here. We got about a minute and a half here before the top of the hour here. But I want to thank you so much, and I want to stay in touch with you. I mean, I appreciate your son, Tony, giving me the introduction to this. And, folks, I want to say this to the audience, Anthony. It's not so simple. You just don't pick the phone up and look up in the phone directory or the computer. I want to call Little Anthony.
It's the process.
It is.
My wife told me today, she says, Anthony, she says, hon, you got 30 messages on your Facebook. I said, dude. They had people back in May calling me. I didn't even know.
See, well, you're a popular guy, and you know how to deal with it.
I decided to take care of it today. I said, oh, my gosh, I got to answer some of these people, And, but technology today is different than it was years ago,
Well, thank you for your time. I mean, I hate to cut it short, but here's what we have to tell the audience. First of all, God bless you and your family. Thank you for giving us the music strong for these years, and thank you for being a believer. And your story of life is a great inspiration. I'd like to have you back sometime if that's good, but stay on the line. I do, sir. Stay on the line with us as we go to the hard break, but I want to let the audience, we're going to go out with this song, ladies and gentlemen, probably one of the most prolific songs of Little Anthony and the Imperials. Of course, would be remiss if we didn't play Tears on My Pillow. Thank you so much to Little Anthony. That is Anthony Gourdine, of an incredible rock and roll legend and a band, Little Anthony and the Imperials, once again inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame back in April of 2009. He continues strong and has some amazing stories. Thank you for being with us today, Little Anthony Gourdine of Little Anthony and the Imperials.
In my heart, caused by you. Love is not a gadget. Love is not a toy. When you find the one you love, she'll fill your heart with joy. If we could start anew, in my heart.